When we talk about human biology, we usually think of it as this marvel of engineering, right? Like the heart beats, the lungs breathe, the stomach digests. It's just mechanics.
Right. It's just the body doing its thing.
Exactly. We don't attach any like moral weight or shame to, I don't know, circulation. We just accept it as the ordinary machinery of being alive.
Yeah.
But then there's this one biological process.
Oh, yeah. The big one.
Yeah. The one that happens to roughly half the population every single month for literally decades of their lives. And yet for centuries, it has been treated like a toxic hazard or a mystical curse and just a deeply shameful secret.
It is, it's entirely unique in that regard, I think, because you have a physiological event that literally ensures the survival of the human species, and it's somehow wrapped in just layer upon layer of cultural taboo.
It's wild. So today, our deep dive is tackling this complex, often really hidden world of menstruation, and we are pulling from a massive mountain of research for this.
We really are. We've got Wikipedia's sweeping cultural history. We have clinical reports on the medical realities of sex during menstruation, and some really fascinating qualitative sociological research from the NCBI.
Yeah, the NCBI study detailing women's intersectional experiences is mind-blowing. Plus, we have cycle sensation data from Healthline and Clue. So, our mission today is to basically decode how a perfectly natural cycle became so heavily stigmatized. We're going to explore the vast gap between that cultural shame and the actual biological reality.
Especially what happens behind closed doors.
Right. And eventually we're going to look at why the menstrual cycle is currently this massive battleground for human rights and modern data privacy.
Which means that, whether you personally menstruate or not, these deeply ingrained cultural taboos are operating in the background of your life. They affect your intimate relationships, your fundamental understanding of human biology, and increasingly your digital privacy.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I'm looking at the historical data, and it feels like, we cannot understand how people navigate the menstrual cycle in private today without first looking at the bizarre ancient myths that kind of laid the groundwork for modern shame.
Oh, totally. The history it's wild.
Some of these ancient beliefs read like really bad science fiction.
They really do. And it starts remarkably early, too. Like, take ancient Rome. You have Pliny the Elder, who's, considered a highly respected naturalist at the time. And he actually documented that a menstruating woman could turn new wine sour.
Wait, literally turn wine sour?
Yeah, just by being near it. He also claimed she could dull the edge of steel and kill crops just by walking past them.
Kill crops?
Yeah.
It's like they thought menstruation gave people like radioactive supervillain powers.
Right, like this uncontrollable aura of destruction. And that level of fear wasn't just isolated to Rome. I mean, anthropologists have found similar themes globally. The French anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss, he observed that indigenous myths across North and South America often equated unmonitored menstrual cycles to literal cosmic chaos.
Cosmic chaos. So not just a bad harvest, but the end of the world.
Exactly. There was this terrifying belief that if women's periods weren't strictly synchronized and, socially controlled, the very fabric of the universe might unravel.
That's a lot of pressure.
A bit, yeah. And then, as early medicine evolved, we got the humoral system. So doctors believed the body was governed by 4 humors, and they thought menstrual issues meant the womb was fundamentally broken, like it was either too hot or too cold.
Which means what exactly?
Well, if a patient had, say, menstrual pain, a physician might prescribe intense aphrodisiacs, theorizing they needed to physically heat up a cold womb to fix the plumbing.
It's like blaming a thunderstorm on somebody sneezing. I mean, the leap in logic is just staggering. It's like this generational game of telephone where these wild ancient fears somehow translated directly into religious rules, right? How did organized faiths process all this?
That's where the idea of pollution really takes firm root. You see these strict spatial rules emerge across the globe. Like in Judaism, you have the rules of niddah, which require physical separation during the cycle and a ritual bath afterward to restore purity.
Right.
In Hinduism, menstruating individuals are historically barred from entering certain temples, like the really famous ban at the Sabarimala temple, which is based on the belief that the deity has an aversion to perceived impurity.
Wow.
Yeah, and the broader Judeo-Christian Islamic heritage really helped cement this concept of the curse globally, casting menstruation as this time when a person is ritually unclean and just, must be separated from the community.
Which is wild because those ancient fears didn't really disappear, did they? They just kind of got a corporate makeover.
Oh, absolutely. They just got sanitized.
Right. I'm thinking of the totally weird Clinical world of modern advertising. Growing up, every single MaxiPad commercial, you know the ones, they poured this strange bright blue liquid onto the pad.
The blue liquid, yes!
It's like advertising a bandage by showing someone bleeding neon green. We are so terrified of the reality of human blood that we have to pretend it's like window cleaner.
And the language in those ads is incredibly telling, too. The emphasis is always on freshness and discretion and confidence. The advertising industry didn't cure the historical taboo, they monetized it.
Yeah, they sold the cure to the shame of being discovered.
Exactly. And pop culture just reinforced this for decades. I mean, menstruation was either completely invisible or it was weaponized for horror. Think of the traumatic gym shower scene in the movie Carrie.
Oh, man. Where she thinks she's bleeding to death.
Yeah, and the other girls pelt her with tampons. It's horrific. It's only very recently with media like the Borat subsequent movie film where they feature that taboo-busting debutante ball fertility dance.
With the heavy menstrual blood reveal.
Right. Creators are finally starting to use shock humor to hold up a mirror and satirize that exact stigma.
So basically, the ancient concept of impurity evolved into modern grossness. We took a biological process that ensures human survival, and we literally marketed it as a hygiene crisis.
It's the great irony of human history, really. The very mechanism of life is treated as a problem to be secretly managed.
Well, let's strip away all that cultural noise and the blue liquid commercials. I want to look at the raw biological mechanics, specifically when it comes to intimacy and sexual pleasure, because the medical data shows the body responds in ways that completely contradict this narrative we're sold.
Oh, completely. The internal anatomy isn't just static during a cycle.
Right, it moves around.
It does. The reproductive organs create this shifting physical landscape.
Right.
For example, the cervix, which is, the gateway between the vaginal canal and the uterus, it literally changes position.
That is still so surprising to me.
It sits higher up in the abdomen during ovulation to facilitate conception, but it drops significantly lower in the vaginal canal during menstruation. So that biological fact physically alters the internal geometry, meaning a sex position that feels great on day 14 might be physically uncomfortable or even painful on day 2.
See, I always assumed any physical discomfort was just a standard, unchanging baseline. Like, it's just you.
Yeah.
But the actual architecture is moving around.
It is.
And the clinical data on lubrication and libido completely upends that whole narrative that you just feel terrible and want to hide under a blanket.
The hormonal reality is super dynamic. I mean, the body experiences a sharp dip in progesterone and a peak in estrogen right before or during menstruation. And those estrogen spikes dramatically increase natural lubrication.
Wow.
Furthermore, the increased blood flow to the pelvic region during this phase heightens nerve sensitivity, which can surprisingly spike the sex drive and actually lead to much stronger physiological orgasms.
I have to admit, the pain relief angle in the research completely blew my mind, because I've always heard of period cramps, dysmenorrhea as just being totally debilitating, but the clinical data says orgasm is actually therapeutic for that.
Yeah, it acts as both a mechanical and chemical release. When the uterus rhythmically contracts during climax and then relaxes, it physically relieves the vascular congestion that causes those severe cramps in the first place.
That makes so much sense.
And on a chemical level, the body floods with endorphins, which are our natural painkillers. Those endorphins are powerful enough to alleviate not just pelvic pain, but even severe menstrual migraines.
Okay, so I am genuinely puzzled by this then. If there are all these incredible biological benefits like natural pain relief, heightened libido, natural lubrication, why does the Kinsey Institute survey in our research show that 49% of people still avoid all genital sexual activity during menstruation? I mean, half the population is literally leaving a natural built-in painkiller on the table.
What's fascinating here is the sheer power of social conditioning. The Kinsey data perfectly highlights this massive disconnect between biological advantage and psychological programming.
Right.
The stigma we discussed in the first section, that deep-seated fear of being gross, the centuries of religious and cultural conditioning about impurity, it actively overrides the physical benefits. The human body is physically wired to potentially enjoy and benefit from the experience, but culturally wired to be completely repulsed by it.
And because that cultural shame is so heavy, people avoid talking about period sex entirely, which is a tragedy because vital sex education is just completely lost in the silence.
Accurate health information becomes the casualty of the taboo.
Exactly. We have to replace this fake cultural risk of grossness with the actual medical mechanics because the body's physical defenses are objectively altered during this time.
Yes. Let's start with the most dangerous misconception, which is the belief that menstruation is a natural contraceptive.
Yes. Let's debunk the math on this because it seems like a lot of people rely on this assumption and it's so risky.
It all comes down to cycle length versus sperm viability. So a typical textbook cycle is 28 days, right?
Right.
But a 21-day cycle is perfectly healthy and normal for millions of people. If a person has a short cycle like that, they might ovulate as early as day 7. Now, sperm are remarkably resilient. They can survive in the female reproductive tract for up to 5 days.
5 days. Wow.
Yeah. So if a couple has unprotected sex on day 5 of a period, those sperm can simply hang around in the fallopian tubes, still viable and waiting, when ovulation occurs just 2 days later.
That is terrifying if you aren't prepared for it. Relying on your period as birth control is basically like leaving your front door wide open just because you think the neighborhood is quiet. The risk of pregnancy is very real. But it's not just pregnancy either. I was completely thrown by the mechanics of STI transmission.
Right. This goes back to that shifting landscape of the cervix we mentioned. To allow menstrual blood and tissue to pass out of the uterus, the cervix has to open slightly.
It physically dilates.
Exactly. Normally, the cervix acts as a protective bottleneck. But during menstruation, that slightly open door provides bloodborne pathogens like HIV, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C a direct, unhindered route into the upper reproductive tract. So the statistical risk of transmitting or contracting these infections genuinely spikes because your physical barrier is compromised.
And the research also detailed a connection to endometriosis, right? Which is a condition where tissue similar to the uterine lining grows outside the uterus, causing severe pain. How does period sex factor into that?
So, a 2025 meta-analysis showed that the odds of having endometriosis are notably higher, about twice as high, for those who regularly engage in penetrative period sex.
Twice as high. That's significant.
Very. The prevailing medical theory here is a phenomenon called retrograde menstruation. During climax, the intense uterine contractions can create a sort of backflow. Instead of the menstrual blood and endometrial tissue exiting the body, those contractions can push the tissue backward, up through the fallopian tubes, and out into the pelvic cavity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and out there, it might implant on other organs and cause endometriosis.
That is a massive concrete medical mechanism that literally nobody talks about. But it makes me wonder, how do we communicate these real physiological risks without just adding to the historical shame we were just unpacking? I don't want people to hear this and think, oh, so it grows and dangerous.
Well, by focusing purely on the mechanics rather than morality, it's about understanding your own machinery. If you know the cervix is slightly open, you adapt. You use barrier methods like condoms to mitigate the STI and pregnancy risks.
Right.
You remember to remove tampons or menstrual cups before intercourse to avoid pushing them deep into the vaginal canal, which can create a medical emergency. Understanding the biological reality isn't meant to scare anyone. It's meant to replace superstitious fear with practical, actionable empowerment.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Navigating these biological realities and the cultural stigmas, it isn't a universal one-size-fits-all experience, is it?
Not at all.
The qualitative data we have shows the emotional burden varies wildly depending on a person's race, their sexual identity, and honestly, who they are sharing a bed with.
The sociological study from the NCBI illuminates this beautifully. Researchers conducted in-depth interviews with 40 women across a highly diverse range of ages, races, and sexual orientations. And their reactions to menstrual intimacy were starkly polarized.
Really polarized.
Yeah. Out of 40 women, only 2 felt neutral about it. 13 had highly positive reactions, but 25 reported deeply negative, stressful experiences.
And looking at the why behind those negative experiences is just heartbreaking. Because it wasn't just about physical discomfort. It was about labor, like physical labor, obsessively worrying about staining the sheets, laying down towels, managing the cleanup.
Yeah.
But the emotional labor sounded exhausting. Participants described having to constantly monitor and manage a male partner's overt disgust. That sounds less like intimacy and more like an unpaid, emotional second job in the bedroom.
It really does. And the intersectional data reveals exactly who is carrying the heaviest burden of that emotional labor. The women who reported the most positive experiences, the ones who embraced the physical pleasure, the emotional vulnerability, and who explicitly described menstrual sex as a private rebellion against societal attitudes, they were disproportionately white, and queer or bisexual.
Interesting.
And they also reported a much higher enjoyment of masturbation and bodily exploration in general.
So I have to ask, does heterosexuality inherently carry more period stigma, or is this deeply tied to the immense pressure that women of color face to conform to sanitized, idealized beauty standards?
The data points to a deeply intertwined mix of both. Heterosexual women, and particularly heterosexual women of color, disproportionately reported negative experiences and intense partner aversion.
Wow.
Body shame doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is heavily influenced by the traditional male gaze, which historically demands that female bodies be neat, odorless, and, constantly sexually available without friction. Add race to that equation and the burden multiplies.
Right, because of those overlapping standards.
Exactly. Women of color already navigate immense societal pressure to conform to racialized, white-centric beauty and hygiene standards, which historically framed marginalized bodies as unclean to begin with. Fighting the menstrual taboo on top of navigating racialized beauty standards is an exhausting psychological battle.
I can't even imagine.
What this study ultimately proves is that partner choice heavily dictates a person's own body affirmation. If the person in your bed is disgusted by a natural biological function, you inevitably internalize that disgust.
So what does this all mean? I mean, the emotional and physical management of menstruation clearly doesn't stay neatly tucked away in the bedroom. When you take this deeply stigmatized biological function and you scale it up to a societal level, it creates massive systemic inequities and, quite frankly, terrifying modern technological dangers.
It really does. And looking strictly at the socioeconomic and legal data, and just to be completely clear here, we are strictly reporting what's in the policy sources today.
Right.
We're not endorsing any political ideology, whether it's about Roe v. Wade, abortion, or the Marxist feminist perspectives mentioned in the literature. We're just laying out the data the researchers documented.
Absolutely, just the facts.
But when you look at that data, you see how quickly cultural stigma calcifies into systemic barriers.
Yeah, and the most immediate barrier I saw was period poverty. The research notes that 1 in 5 low-income individuals miss school or work simply because they cannot afford menstrual products.
1 in 5. It's huge.
And it's not just about comfort, it's about the mechanics of poverty. When products are taxed as luxury items, the so-called pink tax people are forced to choose between groceries and tampons, so they resort to unsafe alternatives, which leads to infections, which leads to medical bills, missed work, and lost wages. Stigma directly limits economic mobility.
It's a vicious cycle. And even wilder, in its most extreme systemic form, the stigma is literally weaponized as a form of violence and control.
This part of the research was really tough to read.
It is. The sources document that forced sterilization is still an active practice globally. We're talking about procedures like endometrial ablation, which surgically destroys the lining of the uterus to permanently stop bleeding, or full hysterectomies.
Oh my God.
And these irreversible procedures are frequently performed on disabled women and girls. Caregivers and institutions frame it as, quote, menstrual management. It's an egregious violation of bodily autonomy, stripping these individuals of their reproductive organs entirely, just so institutions don't have to deal with the hygiene aspect of a natural biological cycle.
That's just horrifying. The convenience of a caregiver is literally overriding a human being's fundamental autonomy.
Yes.
And the research also touches on the severe mental health toll within the transgender community. Trans men and non-binary individuals who menstruate often face intense gender dysphoria during their cycle. And that psychological distress is completely compounded by a very literal physical danger, the lack of access to safe public bathrooms.
Right, the logistics are incredibly stressful.
Yeah, I mean, the fear of simply opening a wrestling pad wrapper in a men's restroom stall is a massive overlooked public health issue. But I want to pivot to the technology side, because this is where the stigma impacts almost everyone with a smartphone right now. Femtech.
Yes.
Period tracking apps.
Yeah.
I used to view these apps as just a helpful private digital calendar. But reading the data privacy reports, it feels like they have the potential to become digital ankle monitors.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the rise of femtech is a massive double-edged sword. Following the overturning of Roe v. Wade in the United States, digital privacy experts started raising severe red flags about data brokers.
And because millions of people use these consumer health apps, right, to track their bleeding, their ovulation, and their sexual activity.
Millions. But here's the catch. Because you consent to the app's terms of service when you download it, that highly sensitive data is often not protected by IPA. Right. IPA is the federal law that keeps your medical records private at a doctor's office. But the app developers legally own that data on your phone, and they can and do share or sell it to third parties.
Meaning that if a person's cycle suddenly stops and then, starts again a few weeks later, that data profile could potentially be acquired by law enforcement to track pregnancies or the sudden end of pregnancy to enforce local abortion laws.
Exactly. The digital breadcrumbs are entirely visible. And the Congressional Research Service noted that this kind of digital surveillance does not happen equally.
Of course not.
It disproportionately targets and affects marginalized communities, specifically BIPOC and low-income individuals who already face much higher rates of state surveillance. This is the ultimate trap of the taboo. When society views a natural cycle as something shameful, something to be hidden from public view, people naturally seek out private digital spaces to manage it.
Yeah.
But those digital spaces are harvesting that exact vulnerability.
That is so bleak. The ultimate cost of viewing menstruation as unclean is the total loss of bodily autonomy. If it's a shameful secret, it's incredibly easy to regulate, it's easy to tax as a luxury item, and it's terrifyingly easy to surveil.
It's all connected. The deep dive we've taken today shows a very clear, unbroken through line. We started with ancient Romans blaming sour wine on a biological cycle, moved to the physiological realities of shifting cervical positions and endorphin rushes, unpacked the intense intersectional emotional burden of intimacy, and finally arrived at the chilling modern reality of period data surveillance.
Yeah. So whether you are navigating physical intimacy with a new partner or just mindlessly clicking agree on a period tracking app's terms of service, understanding the true mechanics and the really heavy cultural weight of this cycle is your ultimate tool. Replacing the myth with actual biological knowledge is how you protect your health, your pleasure, and your digital privacy.
Absolutely. Knowledge strips the power away from the stigma and returns it directly to the individual.
I want to leave you with a lingering idea to ponder today. For centuries, society has treated the menstrual cycle as either a mystical curse to be feared or a medical liability to be managed and hidden. But what if the most radical rebellion of all isn't throwing a party to celebrate it, and it certainly isn't hiding it in shame? What if the ultimate rebellion is simply demanding that society treat it as a completely neutral, ordinary fact of human existence?
Just completely normal.
Yeah. Just like a heart beating or a lung breathing, a marvel of biological engineering doing exactly what it was designed to do.
A very powerful thought to end on.
Thanks for taking the plunge with us today. Keep questioning the things you've always been told are just the way it is.